Supply chain vulnerabilities. Joining us tonight, Arkansas Republican Senator Tom Cotton and Virginia Democratic Senator Tim Kaine. Thank you both for being here. I want to talk about your bill and that you're working on, but a couple of things quickly first. Senator Cotton, today you sent a letter about demanding records on border wall materials being preserved, saying you want accountability and transparency for the Department of Defense about its role in the disposal of excess border wall materials. What's the issue there, and how concerned about are you?
Well, Brett, the Biden administration has had many of these border wall materials going back to the Trump administration. We don't want to see them rush to sell those materials if, as we all anticipate, the Trump administration is going to be using them. We'd be selling them for just pennies on the dollar. We want them to actually explain what their next steps are and why they may be going forward with these sales. And if they're unreasonable sales, we want to stop that so the Trump administration can save the taxpayer dollar, and what we anticipate will be finishing the border wall.
Yeah, Senator Kaine, about that, I mean, obviously we had an election and immigration was one of the issues, and there's some people at home saying, you know, why get rid of this material if they're going to use it in the next administration to build more wall?
Yeah, Brett, I haven't followed the issue of disposal of any of the material.
Yeah.
We're expecting this to be a top priority next year, and we'll deal with it as it comes.
And let me ask you this, Senator Kaine. You know, you obviously were a vice presidential nominee with Secretary Clinton, and we're in the aftermath of an election here. Is the Democratic Party having this kind of thought about the future right now? How do you describe it?
Yeah, look, we are having a significant discussion about the next few years. I'm not so much a Democrat, I'm a Virginia guy, so I'm very focused on Virginia. But I think if I could sum it up, the attitude now is advance everywhere we can together and defend everything we must.
Well, let's talk about the common ground here. Protecting our Essential Medicines Act, create interagency task force, name drugs critical to health and safety, assess risk of drug supply shortages, among other things. Senator Kaine, this is important.
It's interesting. I'm on the Help Committee. Tom is not. But we're really tackling this as Armed Services Committee members because we look at it as a critical national security issue.
And what is the national security aspect of it, Senator Cotton?
Well, if you look at the supply chains that we have for some basic drugs in America, a lot of it goes back to China or other adversarial nations. Our legislation would direct the government to take stock of where we're obtaining these prescription drugs, or in some cases over-the-counter drugs, or their precursor ingredients, to make sure that we don't have adversarial nations like China that control them, that could end up cutting them off in a moment of national crisis. I think many people were worried during the pandemic when we discovered how dependent we are on China, and they threatened to cut us off from those drugs. And then you take the fact that one of the biggest purchasers of drugs in our federal government is the Department of Defense for our troops who need all those basic drugs.
It's also a price issue. Here's the president-elect today.
The horrible middleman that makes more money, frankly, than the drug companies, and they don't do anything except they're a middleman. We're going to knock out the middleman. They are rich as hell. And we're going to knock out the middleman. We're going to get drug costs down at levels that nobody has ever seen before.
Does this all factor into that, Senator Kaine?
The pharma companies at least do the research and create the life-saving treatments and cures. The managers in the middle often are more profitable than the pharmaceutical companies, but we haven't paid attention to them.
Do you both see the prospect of working together in this new Congress with a new president in the common ground way you're working now?
Well, I certainly hope so, Brett. Obviously, Tim and I have our disagreements on certain issues. Sometimes those issues are more high profile or prominent in the news. But when you're looking at things like the availability of life-saving drugs for all Americans or the readiness of our troops, that's something where we have common ground, and we all hope to be able to work together for the common good of the American people.
Senator Kaine,
and Brett, I completely agree. One little piece of the bills that Tom and I are promoting is just simple communication. When pharmacies and pharmaceutical companies see an uptick in demand of a particular drug, we're asking them to share that with the FDA and others so that we can see shortages before they develop. That will then enable us to use tools like the Defense Production Act and other tools to spur American production so that shortages never occur. This is good government stuff. There's no Dems and Rs in trying to stop drug shortages.
Yeah, Dr. Martin Makary nominated to be the next FDA commissioner. We know him well here. Senators, thanks so much for coming on Common Ground.
Thanks, Brett.
Thank you, Brett.
You can see all the Common Ground segments